Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to our Shravanotsav. Today is a special session. As you all know, Kamsa is going to get killed today. After a long, long time, we have reached to that point. And to explain that pastime and the learnings from that pastime, we are very fortunate to have His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji. We all love his lectures, and in the past as well, Prabhuji has given wonderful lectures, and from the past times, he has given us very wonderful lessons or learnings. And also in the end, in the question and answer session, Prabhuji also uh, uh, points very wonderful teachings from our philosophy, and it is very easy and practical way that Prabhuji explains. And we all know Prabhuji's introduction. Prabhuji is a global GBC. He is a lawyer by profession in Singapore. He's in the Singapore area. He's a zonal supervisor for preaching, as well as he manages a center in Singapore. And then he travels a lot. He gives lectures to so many places. And he is a wonderful kirtaniya as well. So many introductions that Prabhuji has that it is never ending. But for now, because we want to actually go towards the pastime and we want to hear from Prabhuji, we will just show our gratitude for Prabhuji's time, and he has taken his time out in his busy schedule by by loudly chanting Hare Krishna mantra for him. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amrish Prabhu. And thank you to all the devotees today. Very nice to see you. Hope you're keeping well and you're happy in Krishna consciousness. It's so nice, this Shravan Utsav, because even while I was preparing and studying this chapter that you have given me, I found it so relishable. Sometimes in the busyness of our schedules, it's very easy for us not to just read in a cursory manner, and that's not good, you know. So this way we are studying it deeply. Srila Prabhupada put so much blood and sweat into his books, and therefore our love for him will actually be shown by how much we are actually loving him. It will actually be demonstrated by how deeply we go into Prabhupada's books. And there's no end to Prabhupada's books because they are like oceans. The deeper you go, you know, the stronger and the larger they get actually. So in that sense, it's just amazing, you see. So we're very happy that you've given us this chance. Today, what we want to do is we want to study this beautiful pastime of the killing of Kamsa. And I'm sure because you're reading it from a, you know, on a systematic way, this will be what we call a very climatic moment in Krishna book actually. And yet, you know, it is only halfway in Krishna book actually, because it's just 44, right? And many more chapters are there all the way to 90. So it's going to be very nice. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudiraye nastaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. We offer all our obeisances to Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vaishnavas. There's a very nice verse that glorifies Krishna, and that the prayers, you know, were stated by the Devatas. And because this whole chapter is actually glorifying Krishna, it's very nice for us to remember him this way. That prayer is in the 12th canto, 13th chapter, first verse. It's a very important prayer for us to remember Krishna by. Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stunvanti Divya Stavai Vedai Sangapada Kramopanishadai Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavashtita tat gatena manasa Pashyanti yam yogino Yashyantam na vidu sura suragana devaya tasmai namaha. Suta Goswami says in that prayer that we all offer obeisances unto that personality whom Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Rudra, and the Maruts, they all praise by chanting transcendental hymns and reciting beautiful Vedic prayers. To that personality we pay obeisances because all the Upanishads, all the Padakramas, all the chanters of the Samavedas, they are all singing the glories of the Lord. The perfected yogis, in their minds, after fixing themselves in trance, they also see the Lord and they are absorbed within Him. And in fact, Krishna's limit can never be found, right, by any devata, any demon. To that personality, we are offering our obeisances. This is the greatness of Krishna. In this chapter, you will find that it begins immediately, right, in a sequential manner, because Kamsa's wrestlers were being primed by Kamsa to actually be prepared to wrestle Krishna and Balaram. And therefore, the moment Kamsa's wrestlers were instructed by Kamsa that these are the two boys that you must fight and defeat and conquer, they actually expressed their determination. This is a very important part of the chapter because the word determination is used here. Sometimes we think, that qualities defined us as devotees. But actually, it is devotional service that defines qualities for devotees. They're two very different points. For example, the word determination is used here. And the Kamsa's wrestlers were very determined. In Bhagavad Gita, so often you will find that the word determination comes out as a very powerful quality that devotees must cultivate. Dhrida Vrataha, for example, is a vow that we take because we are determined to perform devotional service. Yet, in whole of Bhagavatam, you will also find that all the great demons were very determined individuals also. Kamsa was highly determined, Hiranyakashipu highly determined. When Hiranyakashipu performed austerities, we cannot match him. No devotee in all the three worlds can match the austerities he did because his determination was so strong. When Hiranyakashipu affectionately put Prahlad on his lap and affectionately brushed his head and smelled the top of his head, no one could express more apparent love for his son than Hiranyakashipu. So actually, these great demons, they were very powerful in Vedic knowledge. They were very determined. When they wanted to be moral, they could be moral. When they decided not to be moral, they could be immoral. So actually, we must be very careful to understand this. Determination, if misused against Krishna, there is no value to it. So qualities do not define whether we are spiritual or not. It is how we use that quality that actually defines our spirituality. And that defines our devotional service. Intelligence, determination, morality, honesty, they're all good. But bereft of Krishna, there is no point. This is very nicely stated by Krishna himself to Uddhava in the 11th canto, 14th chapter, 22nd verse. Easy to remember, 11, 14, then 22. There Krishna makes it very clear. Dharma satya daya peto vidya va tapasan vitaha mad bhaktya petam atmanam na samyak prapunati hi. The translation is very nice. Krishna says there, even if you have religious activities and you're performing them, and even if you're endowed with honesty and mercy and knowledge, which is obtained with great penance, these are all good qualities, by the way. None of these can completely purify our consciousness if they are bereft of loving service unto me. This is a very important verse for us to understand. Because sometimes, we meet people who say that it is better to be moral and have values than to be a devotee. Yes, we know sometimes devotees can be a handful. My Guru Maharaj used to say half of iskcon are mental because all the devotees come because they have so much of issues. So where do they go? They have to come to Krishna, isn't it? So that's how they have to come. But despite all the difficulties that devotees may have or may give, the point is they are not bereft of loving service to Krishna. They know that devotional service is the whole and soul for them. And that is what Krishna values very much. This is a very important point we should remember. And it is not just the cultivation of determination. The great materialists are very determined. They're determined to make money. but you are determined to spend time with Krishna. So that is the first point actually that's important. And that's coming out from that line, where the wrestlers, they had determination. They were determined, but they were determined to defeat the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So once they were determined and the arena was ready, Bhagavatam tells us that Krishna, he confronted Chanura, and Lord Balram, he confronted Rohini. No, sorry, he was Devakinandan. He actually had to meet Mushtika. So there was Chanura and there was Mushtika. Now Krishna and Chanura, right, and then Balaram and Mushtika, they begin locking with each other. And Krishna book, Prabhupada gives us such an amazing example of their fighting. It's so descriptive that it is so graphic actually. They say that, Prabhupada writes that first they started hand to hand, then they wrestled leg to leg, then they would press against each other, each one trying to come out victorious. Then they joined palm to palm, just like we see in wrestling today. And they tried to press each other, even chest to chest, and they begin striking each other actually. And then even when they began to do that, the fighting began to increase in intensity. They pushed each other from one place to another. Sometimes one would capture one, sometimes they would throw him on the ground, another one would rush back to the front, and like that they were trying to overcome each other with all the different holds. Bhagavatam tells us this fighting increased step by step. They were picking each other, dragging each other, pushing each other. Then their legs and our hands were all locked together. In fact, Prabhupada ends that point by saying all the different arts of wrestling were perfectly displayed by all four of them, including the wrestlers, but mostly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his first expansion, Balaram. So this array of wrestling skills, we may think, oh, Krishna also is a wrestler. The important thing to understand here, Nectar of Devotion tells us, anything that Krishna touches, he's expert in. Remember, he's expert in all the 64 arts, right? He's expert in all the different things. And when he was in the ashram of Sandipani Muni, it didn't take long for him. Sandipani Muni would teach him in the morning, and by evening, Krishna would master it. How nice if we were like that, huh? And how nice if our children were like that. No tension, no blood pressure. But unfortunately, we are not Krishna, you see. But Krishna was so expert. So therefore, wrestling is also an art, you see. Therefore, you can see anything that is touched by Krishna, right, becomes transcendental. Why are we talking about wrestling moves? We are not watching WWE or any of these wrestling movies or anything or series. No, we're not. But when it comes to the fact that Krishna was wrestling, we are all eagerly listening about Krishna. Because morality for us is not defined by an activity. Morality for us is defined by whether Krishna endorses it or he does not. That is very important. If Krishna endorses something, we are prepared to do it because Krishna is the source of morality. It is not our whimsical ideas that is the source of morality. So these two, the two pairs of boys together with Chanura and Mushtika, they were fighting. But this is an important point. The audience that were in the wrestling arena, they had all gathered actually to see Krishna. And they were all gathered there to see what was all this big pageantry about. But they were not very satisfied, Krishna book tells us. Why were they not satisfied? They were seeing Krishna and Balaram, but why they were not satisfied? Because in their hearts, they looked at Chanura and Mushtika, and they said that they are strong as thunderbolts. They were huge wrestlers, very powerful. They were undefeated, actually. And then they said, look at Krishna and Balaram. Krishna and Balaram, they are so small. They look so soft, and these boys, they are very tender age. But look at Chanura and Mushtika. They are strong as mountains, and they are so huge. The principles of justice, all the ladies who were sitting down specifically, the principles of justice, they said, will not remain here. They have left this arena. In fact, Bhagavatam tells us the moment the ladies saw that, that Chanura and Mushtika had such an advantageous position, they felt this entire thing was not fair. And Krishna book tells us that these devotees who were sitting there, they were not impressed by this arrangement. Why? Because they were compassionate and they favored Krishna and Balaram. This is another very important point for us to understand. It is very natural for devotees, right? That when they actually, when they take up devotional service, an important component of our devotional service is actually our compassion. This is very important. By nature, Bhagavatam tells us that devotees are very compassionate and they are always favorable to Krishna. The demons remember Krishna very much, but they're not favorable to Krishna and they're never compassionate. If we claim to be devotees, then compassion must be in our hearts actually. This is a very important point. Don't forget, in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, looked around at the battlefield and he did not want to fight his kinsman because Prabhupada writes in the purport, not because Arjuna was weak in one sense, but because as a Vaishnava, his heart was very soft, very soft. Look at Ambrish Maharaj in the 9th canto. He, even though Durvasa Muni did so much of injustice to him, when Durvasa Muni finally came and fell at his feet, Bhagavatam tells us that Ambrish Maharaj was embarrassed. He was embarrassed that someone was falling at his feet and he just picked him up and said, please don't do this. So Vaishnavas are very compassionate. Another thing that's important is the audience begin to feel that even though Kamsa was the king, he was king in name only. They were not supporting him, especially at this match. Up till then, before Krishna entered Mathura with Balram, and they did not see him personally, some of the subjects were very much with Kamsa, but some subjects were not sure. But when they sat in this arena, then they realized that all the principles of justice will not be here because this is an unfair match. And they go one step further by saying, we also don't want to be part of this. And they say something very nicely, that if we stay, we are also implicated in this matter. This is important. Bhagavatam says that the ladies were talking. They said that if we remain and we remain silent, or if we don't say anything and we just continue watching, then we are also subjected to sinful activities. This is a very practical point for devotees. Sometimes you may be in a congregation and one devotee speaks bad about another devotee. If you stand there and you just hear silently, and you just continue hearing and not interfere, even if you know for a fact that that devotee should not be spoken that way, and even if you know for a fact that this is not Vaishnava etiquette for us to do so. Actually, Vaishnava etiquette by Sanatan Goswami tells us that we become implicated in the offense against the devotee. We do. It's a very important point we should not forget. That's why Prabhupada wrote, in many purports, that when we hear or see something unjust, we should either leave the place if we are unable to counter it, or in extreme cases, as Sastras would say, if we cannot stop this, Sastras would say that we should just take our life. Of course, your lives are very precious. Don't take it. Keep it for Krishna. But we should be firm about this matter. If others are insulting us, never mind. We tolerate. But we should never tolerate the insult of others. And this is what the ladies were feeling actually. So they felt that Kamsa was a king only in name. They lost their sense of sense enjoyment actually. They had come there to be very happy. But when they saw Krishna, they became happier. But when they saw Krishna and Balaram being put up against these wrestlers, they were not happy. That's why Bhagavatam tells us our enjoyment comes from seeing and connecting to Krishna. That is the source of our enjoyment. But our enjoyment does not come when we are ill-motivated towards Krishna and his devotees. Kamsa, who organized this match, and all the wrestlers who had his association, because of Asat Sangha, they were all ill-disposed and unfavorably disposed to Krishna. Therefore, when they were interacting with Krishna, it was not a sport. Krishna would wrestle with so many of his gopas in Vrindavan. But these wrestlers, apart from being very big, they were wrestling with an ill motivation. That's why Prabhus and Matajis, we should not say that we are not at a level, we are still very young in devotional service. In fact, from the time we are young in devotional service, we should keep one thing in mind. Savai pumsam paro dharmo, yathor bhakti radok sache, ahai tuki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. So nice to see devotees chanting, your verses, Savai pumsam paro dharmo. The supreme occupation of our humanity is actually to render devotional service to Krishna. And this devotional service, to be successful and satisfying to the soul, it must do two things. Ahaituki, there must not be any ill motivation. There must not be any motivation other than to please Krishna. This we must learn to check in our own hearts. We should not say this is only for pure devotees. Purity is not attained overnight. Purity is a spectrum. We have to start today to become pure. And Prabhupada wanted all of us to become pure devotees. So it is not an ambition that we want to become pure. It is our birthright to become pure so that then we can render service to Krishna. So these ladies, they were very exalted devotees sitting down there. They had no sense enjoyment because immediately they could recognize that the motive of Kamsa and the motive of the restless, they were not good at all. That's why Prabhupada says so nicely, in Krishna book, that actually the mark of devotees is that they are always well behaved. They have what we call, in Bhagavatam, Aryan culture. Aryan culture means they are always having good qualities to them. And these good qualities are not cultivated. They come naturally from sincere devotional service. When sincere devotional service is there, they will come. And this proof is given in the 5th canto, 18th chapter, 12th shloka. 5, 18, 12. Prabhupada liked this verse very much. Yasyasti bhakti bhagavati akinchana sarvai gunaistatra samasate suraha harau abhaktasya kuto mahadguna manoratena satidavato bahi. The translation is very nice. All the devatas, the exalted qualities that they have, religion, knowledge, renunciation, these things become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion. Prabhupada uses the word unalloyed devotion. That means to the extent that our devotional service is pure, to that extent the qualities, right, which are godly, they will manifest. To the extent that we are still motivated materially in our bhakti, to that extent, our devotional qualities will not manifest. This is a very important point. So we may be very adept at mystic yoga, honest endeavor for maintaining our families, all of this. But if we are driven by mental speculation, if we do not engage in the service of the Lord, then how can such a person have good qualities? This is what the verse is asking us, you see. So it's a very important point, actually. So the importance of tolerating an act which we know is not correct towards a devotee or to the Lord means we are impliedly consenting to it. Right, in law, they say that silence means consent. So if I ask you a question and everyone's silent, that means you agree. That's how. So in spiritual law also, that is the same. That's why material laws are getting this. We are not getting it from anyone. We're getting it from God only, you see. So this is very important. So the ladies were disturbed seeing this disparity. But then in a moment of disturbance, something very beautiful happened. As they were talking, suddenly one lady told another lady, my dear friends, one of the ladies spoke up. She said, actually, look carefully now. I know there's a battle going on, but look at the face of Krishna. There are drops of perspiration on his face. Yes, it's there. Why? Because he's chasing the enemy. Enemy is not chasing him. He's chasing the enemy. And his face appears like a lotus flower with drops of water. You all have seen the mirror. You know how we all look. When we are sweating and we have drops of perspiration, can anyone say, Prabhu, your face is like a lotus, with drops of water? Nobody will say. Nobody will come in next to us even when that happens. But when Krishna is perspiring, even his perspiration is transcendental. He looks like a lotus flower with drops of water falling off it. See how beautiful Krishna is. But Balramji is just as beautiful, because when they saw Krishna's face, another lady then said, don't you see the face of Lord Balram? His face is especially beautiful because he has a reddish hue on his white face. Lord Balram is white, right? So when he's, exerting, the reddish hue can be seen because he's very strenuously pushing himself actually in this match. So this is very beautiful. Why? Because it shows us one very important thing. Krishna and Balram are absolute by nature. So if they perspire, it is very beautiful. If they are fighting, it is also very beautiful. When they are transcendently angry, it is also very beautiful. But because we are all products of material energy, all these things do not appear beautiful. This is a very important point. And it's not the demons who could appreciate the beauty of Krishna while they were fighting. Mushtika and Chanura actually were frankly fighting for their lives. They had no time to see, oh, how beautiful is the wrestler who's fighting me. Kamsa was very worried because he was seeing that my wrestlers are not winning. But the ladies, the crowd that was watching, they could appreciate the beauty of Krishna. Why? Because their eyes were anointed with love. Premanjana Churita. That is the important thing. Huh? This is the important thing. When devotees see when they see Krishna, they take darshan. And when they take darshan, Krishna gives ikshanam. In Bhagavatam, these two words are very important. Darshan means you take darshan of the Lord. Ikshanam means the Lord gives you audience. Very nice point. Huh? Ikshanam means he gives you audience. And therefore you take his darshan. We never use the word, pashyati. Pashyati generally means to see. But darshan is always used for Krishna. And ikshanam is always used for Krishna. So that's why the devotees, their eyes are anointed with love. But the demons see Krishna as death personified. As death personified. And at this point, because the ladies now, they were not distracted by the disparity of the wrestling. They were now absorbed, not distracted. They were now absorbed by the beauty of Krishna. They were absorbed by the beauty of Krishna. And that's why then they all address each other. And they said, my dear friend, we are now looking at Krishna and Balram for a while. But imagine the gopis. Imagine how fortunate are the residents of Vrindavan, where Krishna is always there as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Imagine how he's always decorated with flower garlands, Vaijayanti flowers. How he's engaged, in tending the cows. And how he's engaged always with sporting with his friends, playing his transcendental flute. How amazing the residents of Vrindavan must be. Because they're so fortunate that we are seeing them now only in the wrestling match. But they are seeing these two boys constantly. They see the lotus feet of Krishna and Balram every day. And these lotus feet, my friend, are worshipped by the great devatas like Brahma and Shiva. So this is very nice point actually. And that is why sometimes we forget. Vrindavan is very beautiful. But Vrindavan is made Vrindavan because Krishna was present. If Krishna decided to take birth in New Zealand, in Auckland, Auckland would have been Vrindavan. And today we'll all be going there for the parikram. You see, so Vrindavan was not special. But because Krishna touched Vrindavan, Vrindavan became special. Just like all the stars, when Krishna was going to take appearance, they were not properly aligned. But when they heard that Krishna was coming, then they became most auspicious. So who was the reason for auspiciousness? Not the stars. It's Krishna. And what is the reason for the beauty of Vrindavan? Not Vrindavan as a place, but Krishna who has consecrated that place. This is very important. And this is not speculation. No? Because in the 31st chapter, Gopi's Song of Separation, in the very first shloka, when the gopis see Krishna, when they cannot see Krishna because they are separated, they say the same point. What is that verse? Jayati te dikam janmana vraja shrayata indira shashwat atrahi daita drishyatam dikshutavakas tvaidrita shavas tvam vichinvate. These Gopi Gita verses are really beautiful. We can just keep singing them and singing them. And what do the gopis say in the very first verse? They say that Krishna, your birth in this land of Vraja has made it exceedingly glorious. That is the point. That is the point. That's why we are not attached to time, place, or circumstances. Wherever Krishna is, that place has become Vrindavan. You're all gathering in Zoom. And because you are gathering to hear Krishna, Zoom has become Vrindavan now. I'm in Singapore, you are there, but Zoom has become Vrindavan. That is the beauty of consciousness. It doesn't need a place. And so the gopis say, this land has become exceedingly glorious because you have stepped on it. Your feet have touched it. And that is why Indira, who is the goddess of fortune, that's why she's staying here. If you are not here, she will leave also. This is very important. And then they say something so nice. They say it is only for your sake, Krishna, that we, your devoted servants, we are maintaining our lives. Can you imagine? The devotees say that they maintain their lives only because Krishna is there. Without Krishna, there is no need. And they say, we are searching everywhere for you. So please show us where you are. See how beautiful This is the point we must understand. And the ladies are speaking about Krishna's beauty. It's so mesmerizing that no one can escape his beauty. You know, when Shukadev Goswami was in the womb of his mother, Bhagavatam tells us that he was still at a point, you know, when he took a long time to come out. 19 years he didn't want to come out. Poor mother, 19 years, you know, imagine holding someone. 9 months, we can't take it, right? My wife told me 6 months she wants to end everything. She wants the baby to come out. Last trimester should come soon. Shukadev Goswami didn't want to come out. But then his heart, you know, was moving towards that impersonalized movement until he heard 2 shlokas from his father. And one of the shlokas he heard is the description of Krishna, and that melted his heart. Barhapidam natavarvapuhu karnayo karnikaram bibrad vasaha kanika kapisham vaijayantim chamalam randram venur adara sudaya purayan gopavrindai Vrindaranyam Swapadaramanam Pravishad Go Gita Kirti. This shloka comes in the 10th canto, 21st chapter, 5th verse, 10:21:5. And this is a landmark verse for the description of Krishna, because it says exactly what the gopis are, what the ladies are saying in this chapter. It says, you know, that Krishna has this beautiful peacock feather that he wears like an ornament on his head. Peacock feather is never an ornament until it touches Krishna. Then they say he has beautiful karnikar flowers and he puts them on his ears, you know. Then he has this beautiful yellow garment that he wears, which is as brilliant as gold. He has this beautiful Vaijayanti garland. Krishna exhibited this transcendental form as the greatest of dances. And when he danced with the gopis, he entered into the forest of Vrindavan. And when he entered into it, he beautified Vrindavan forest with the marks of his footprints. He filled the holes of his flute with the nectar of his lips. How beautiful is that? And the cowherd boys all sang his glories. This is the greatness of Krishna. That's what the ladies are now concentrating on. They are thinking, how beautiful is the form of Krishna. All the gopis must be always meditating on his beautiful nature, his complexion, his beauty, which is unparalleled. When someone asked Prabhupada, you know, how beautiful is Krishna? When Prabhupada heard that, Prabhupada said something very nice. He said this very beautiful verse from Nectar of Devotion. In Nectar of Devotion, he says, he quotes that verse, Smeram bhangitraya parichitam sachi vishtirna drishtim vamsi nashtaya adara kirkishalayam ujvala chandrakenaha govindam akyam hari tanumitaha keshi tirtha upakante ma prekshita stavayadi sakhe bandhu sange astirangaha. And Prabhupada gave us the translation. It is, who is saying? Yes, it's Shukadev Goswami. No, Rupa Goswami is saying this. Rupa Goswami says, my dear friend, if you're indeed attached to worldly friends, then do one thing. Don't look at the smiling face of Lord Govinda. Have you all heard of reverse psychology? You all have, right? The father of reverse psychology is Rupa Goswami. And he is the one who started it, actually. Because he's telling us here, if you're interested in material world and you have material friends and you want to maintain that, do one thing. Don't look at the smiling face of this boy whose name is Govinda, Govinda Makyam. Why? Because he stands on this Yamuna and he stands at Yamuna on the Keshigat. Don't look at him because he will cast sidelong glances at you. Don't look at him because he will place his flute to his lips and they will seem like newly blossomed twigs. Don't look at him because his transcendental body, Smeram Bhangitraya, it is bent in 3 places and it appears very beautiful and bright in the moonlight. So Prabhupada gives, you know, I think he quotes this in Chaitanya Leela, Adi. It is in Adi 5, text 2 to 4. And you should read the purport when you find time. It's only 2 paragraphs, but Prabhupada says very nicely. He says it's a nice verse composed by Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami is saying how one gopi is telling the other gopi, my friend, please don't go there, meaning to Yamuna. Because if you go there, what will happen is you will see this boy. Then the other gopi is saying, my dear friend, why are you warning me? He says, because there is a boy named Govinda. Then the gopi says, what is he doing? He's simply smiling. And with his flute, he's so bright by the rays of the moon that he looks very, very beautiful. Then the other gopi says, then what happens? Then the other gopi says, my friend, if you go there and see him, then you will forget all your engagement with family. You will forget all your engagement with friendship. You'll forget love and everything else in society. And what will happen? Krishna will absorb everything. So don't go there. The gopi is saying, don't go there. And Prabhupada ends the purport by saying, in other words, Krishna is so attractive by his activities, his pastimes, his beauty, his opulence, his strength, everything. If you read the history of Krishna's activities in Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, they are so attractive, Srila Prabhupada says, that one becomes automatically attracted, automatically. And he will forget all other attractions. Prabhupada says this is natural. This is not artificial. Why? Krishna consciousness is so nice that the moment you're situated in Krishna consciousness, you will forget all nonsense of this material life. Powerful statement by our founder Acharya. All nonsense of this material life. So I made sure when I was reading this as I was growing up, my mother would never see this verse. Otherwise, she'll get a heart attack, thinking that, oh, if he comes to Krishna, he will forget us, he will forget family, he'll forget everything. But this is the greatness of Krishna. And therefore, in this way, the ladies pacified themselves. They remembered Krishna, and they were speaking how pious and how great must the gopis be. They were just thinking about Krishna. This chapter is entitled Killing of Kamsa, but actually it is the glorification of Krishna. And it's also the glorification of the gopis. And as the ladies spoke about the gopis, they were saying, these gopis, no one can be like them. Because even while churning butter, even while tending to the cows, even while husking the paddies, even while performing any activities, they would just be remembering Krishna. That's all. So whatever pious activities they have all done, they have done everything that's needed to be done. That's why they are now in Vrindavan. So sometimes people ask us, you should perform some Vedic ceremonies, you should do all other things, tirthas, yatras, do some mystic yoga, then later you can take up devotional service. But in the 3rd canto, 33rd chapter, 7th shloka, Devahuti says to Kapila Dev that the reverse is true. Aho bataswa pachato gariyan yad jivagre vartate namatubhyam tapostapaste juhu sashnu arya brahmanuchu namagrananti ete. If you read the shloka, it's a very surprising thing. Many people who come to Krishna consciousness don't realize the secret. The secret, Devahuti Mata says, that even if we are born in families which are not of high birth, all of us, wherever we are born, but because we are chanting the holy names of Krishna, because we have taken up devotional service, Devahuti says it is understood that in our past lives, we have executed all kinds of austerities. In our past, we have done all fire sacrifice. In our past births, we have achieved all the good manners of Aryans. In the past, we have gone to all the yatras and all the tirthas. In the past, we have studied all the Vedas. In other words, we have fulfilled everything required. And therefore, taking up chanting of the holy name is not the starting point. Taking up the holy name means all of this have already been performed. That's how great and qualifying the holy name is. This is a very important point we must understand. And if we don't understand that, we will minimize the glories of devotional service. We will think that the Vedas and everything else, we must still do all those things. We must consult astrologers, do this samskar, do that samskar. Then we can elevate ourselves. No, the gopis were not educated. No MSc, no BCom, nothing. They only brought all the milk they had every day to the place to sell. But even when they went there, what would they do? They would still remember Krishna. they would still remember Krishna. Vigre tu kama kilagopa kanya murari pada pidachitta vritti dadyadikam mohavacha vocha govinda damo dharmadaveti grahe grahe gopavadhu kadambe sarve militva samavapya yogam punyani namani patanti nityam govinda damo dharmadaveti. These are shlokas from Bilva Mangal Thakur. They are so beautiful to read and chant. Even if we don't understand them, our hearts are moved by his devotion. You see. But what are the two shlokas? The two shlokas are saying that these gopis, like mad women and girls, they would bring dahi and curd and they would bring it to sell. But instead of telling everyone, come and buy this butter and yogurt, they would chant Govinda, Damodara, Madhava. And people would think these people are mad people. Instead of selling something, they're chanting someone's names. And the second shloka, Grahe Grahe Gopa Vaddu Kadambe. All these gopis in the evenings, they would come together. The moment Krishna came in the morning, they would come together and they would hear and remember Krishna. That's all they did. That's all they did. And then Krishna book here, the ladies say that they were so expert that they were always living absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And that's what you're all, trying so hard and so successfully to do. In this 1 hour that we're spending together, we are all absorbed. Everything that is outside, we have forgotten. Isn't it true? No hankering in our hearts, no fear, no anxiety, no envy, nothing is there. It's all Krishna. This is the greatness of Krishna. And even though we are in separation from Krishna, in the sense that Krishna is not in front of us like he was in front of the gopis, even then when the gopis separated from Krishna, they still remember the Krishna as intensely, if not more intensely. There's one shloka also there, where the gopis sing. Chalasiyat vraja charayan pashun nalina sundaram natate padam shilatrinankurai shidatitina kalilatamana kanta gacchati. They say, my dear Master Krishna, my dear lover, when you leave the cowherd village to herd the cows, our minds become disturbed with the thought that your feet, more beautiful than a lotus, will be pricked by the spiked husk of grains and the rough grass and plants. This is how the gopis are thinking of Krishna. And then, when Krishna comes back, the gopis become so happy to see him. Atitiyad bhavan ahanikananam trute yugayate tvam pasyatam kutila kuntalam Shri Mukham Chate Jada Udikshatam Pakshma Kridrisham. This is the famous verse where they curse the creator, Brahma. Why Brahma gave us eyelids? Because when we blink, it is like Trute Yugayate. When Krishna goes away, he looks very beautiful, but whole day the gopis don't see him. But when Krishna comes back, he's all messed up actually. But even while being messed up, he looks even more beautiful. That's the same thing the ladies are saying here in today's chapter. They're saying that even though Krishna and Balrama are perspiring, they are still very beautiful. They are still very beautiful. And this is the mood of the devotees. Anything related to Krishna consciousness is always beautiful. We cannot understand this point. I don't know how many times you and I have been blinking, since we are seeing each other. But are we rolling on the floor in pain because, when we blink, we couldn't see Krishna? No, nobody's rolling. We're just blinking and we have no clue that we are not seeing Krishna or not seeing the devotees. How high is their point here? Now the ladies, they stop speaking this way. But Krishna book, shows us one very important point in this chapter. It's very difficult in this material world for us to be not envious of another devotee who's doing very well. It's very difficult sometimes. When a devotee sings nicely, cooks very nicely, does something very amazing, right? In the heart somewhere we will say, why can't I be like that? And if we are not careful with that, right, it will become what we call envy, if we are not careful. Sometimes there's a very fine line between saying, I'm very inspired by you, Prabhu, but inside, Prabhu, I'm very envious of you. Very fine line. Very fine line. The first surfaces very nicely, but the one inside is very difficult. But look at these ladies. Were they talking about how their devotion was to Krishna? No. They were just talking about how exalted the gopis were. They're all contemporaries, actually, And for contemporaries not to be envious with each other is very difficult. And yet they openly say that the gopis are the highest and the most exalted of devotees. If only we learned how to be like this, how nice it would be. This is the mood that we must cultivate in our heart. Be the well-wisher of devotees. When a devotee does well, mean them well, pray for them, and pray to Krishna that you can serve them. By serving, we will also have a taste that they are tasting. That's why we don't imitate the great devotees, but we follow in their footsteps. Follow means, implicit to following them is the absence of envy. Very important. You cannot follow anyone if you're envious of him. If you imitate someone, it is a sign of envy. But if you follow someone, envy is not present. That is why our acharyas told us to do this. And now the ladies say, no, actually not the ladies, Prabhupada says in Krishna book, Prabhupada inserts now, and where Prabhupada inserts, it becomes very important. Prabhupada inserts in this chapter, after hearing the ladies, Prabhupada says that the gopis give us the perfect example of how we can execute Krishna consciousness while performing various types of material engagements. Isn't it true? Were the gopis sannyasinis? No, they were not. They didn't renounce anything. They were with family, with children, everything. But their minds and their hearts always were with Krishna. That is why even Krishna told Arjuna. Arjuna was perplexed, isn't it? How to do this now? But in 8.7 of Bhagavad Gita, I think, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhyacha. I think that's the verse. Mai arpita mano buddhi mam evaishasi asamshayaha. So Krishna very clearly states in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, you always think of me in this form, in the form of Krishna. At the same time, you carry out your prescribed duty. So all of us, we don't have to leave where we are, do what we are doing. But at the same time, you please put Krishna in the center. Don't have to change anything, but add everything. Add everything means add Krishna. The moment you add Krishna, everything changes. Don't have to do it artificially. If you add Krishna, everything will change. The moment Krishna was added in Arjuna's life in the middle of Bhagavad Gita, everything changed for Arjuna. He fought the best fight he ever had, but he was not attached to it. Why? Because his activities were dedicated to Krishna. Mai arpita mano buddhi. His activities were dedicated to Krishna, and his mind and intelligence was fixed on him. So if you dedicate your activity to Krishna, mind intelligence will follow. That's why Prabhupada says bhakti is devotional service. Because only on the platform of service can you engage mind and intelligence. If we just sit down and talk armchair philosophy about Krishna consciousness until the cows come home, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. But if we take up service, what is the service we're doing? You've all put aside 1 hour just to spend time with Krishna. This is seva. This is seva. You could have done anything else, but you're doing it now. This is service. When you do this, Krishna says, Mam avaishasi ashamsayaha, without doubt, you will attain me. And Prabhupada says the same thing he says in Krishna book in that purport. Prabhupada says there, this instruction to Arjuna is very important. Why? For all of us engage in material activities. Lord does not say that one should give up his duties or engagement. Prabhupada makes it very clear. Continue them, but at the same time, you think of Krishna. And in that way, just like the ladies thought of Krishna and they became peaceful, we also think of Krishna and we will become peaceful. This is very important. This is the meaning of absorption. And you can see from all that we have shared with the gopis, with the instructions of Arjuna, in Bhagavad Gita, how clear this is. Very important, very important. So now that the ladies had spoken and now they became very peaceful, and now that Prabhupada has actually told us how important it is actually to remember that Krishna is topmost in our lives. Now what happened? Krishna, the super soul, looked around the audience and he realized that, my God, all of them are in so much anxiety because they think we too are small boys. In Vrindavan Leela, Mathura Leela, Krishna uses Yoga Maya potency so that the devotees always think of him, in these transcendental relationships. Therefore, it was very natural that they were anxious. Remember when Krishna was fighting with Kaliya, you would have done the chapter. The moment all of them came to the banks of Yamuna, how many devotees fainted? Yeah, Yashoda Mata just swooned and fainted like a rod. Everybody was fainting because they were too anxious. And there, when Krishna saw, oh, they are fainting too much, Krishna decided, let's stop this fight. And in the same way here now, when the super soul of every living being, why the significance of super soul? Because Krishna knows everyone's heart. Everyone's heart. He knows. Whatever we are not saying, he knows. Whatever we are saying, of course, he knows. But the part we are always scared about is what we are not saying, isn't it? The good news is he knows that also. He knows that. When Chitraketu Maharaj saw Krishna, and he was asked, say something, or what do you want? What did he say? He said, my Lord, everything that needs to be known is known by you. In the presence of the sun, what is the light of a glowworm? How nice, isn't it? In the presence of sun, what is the light of a glowworm? The first time I saw a glowworm, I think, was in New Zealand, one of those caves, by the way. So it just came to mind. And therefore, Krishna is the super soul. He understood in everyone's heart that all his devotees were anxious for him. So what was it? Krishna decided, enough of this toying business now. Let's stop the wrestling match. And he decided that he will kill the wrestlers immediately. All the parents of Lord Balram and Krishna, they were all there, by the way. Yeah? Nanda Maharaj was there, Yashoda was there, Vasudev was there, Devaki was there. Krishna book tells us they were all anxious. Why? Because by Yogamaya potency, they did not know the unlimited strength of their children. At that point, they did not know. So Lord Balram was fighting with the wrestler Mushtika in the same way Krishna was. And Krishna then started being cruel. Prabhupada used the word, he appeared to be cruel with Chanura. And what did he do? He struck him 3 times with his fist. The great wrestler was completely jolted to the astonishment of the audience. Chanura then took one last chance to attack Krishna, just like a hawk will swoop upon another hawk. And at that point of time, Krishna was not even slightly disturbed, any more than a garland would disturb an elephant. What did he do? He caught the 2 hands of Chanura and he began to wheel him around and around and around, and then he threw him to the ground, just like that. Now, Bhagavatam tells us that, that Chanura fell like the flag of Indra. Indra is always in trouble. And every time he's in trouble, his flag drops. So even in Bhagavatam, I think it's a running transcendental joke that if anything drops, it's like the flag of Indra. See, Bhagavatam has so much humor even, isn't it? There's so much humor in Bhagavatam. We can't help but laugh. So Chanura just fell like the flag of Indra, and all his ornaments were scattered here and there. And Bhagavatam tells us actually before he hit the ground, his vital force had left him, even before he hit the ground. So now Lord Balram, who is Adi Guru, who is the personification of strength, what do you think he would do to Mushtika? He just caught him. And when Mushtika hit him, Balram hit him back with great force. That just one hit caused Mushtika to tremble and he started vomiting blood. And in that distressful condition, he gave up his vital force and he fell down like a tree falls down in a hurricane. That's how powerful he was. There was shock amongst the wrestlers. And Krishna book tells us immediately after that, all the other wrestlers who were there, they started coming forward and they started fighting Krishna and Balaram. But Krishna and Balaram, one by one, all the remaining wrestlers were killed, and whoever left, they fled from the scene because they valued their life more. All the cowherd boyfriends of Krishna, when they saw that Krishna and Balaram had won, they became very, very happy and they congratulated them. Actually, if you read some other sastras that Sanatana Goswami has written, some of these friends would actually go up to Krishna and congratulate them and say, you know why you could fight so well? Because we gave you practice back in Vrindavan. That is why you all won your matches. In typical, boyhood friendship style, they said, no, you can't take the credit for this actually, because it's because, you were fighting with us. So we could see all your skills, you see. So they were all so happy. They came to see him with pleasure. Trumpets sounded, cattle drums were beaten. And amidst all that, right, Prabhupada doesn't leave out one beautiful detail. Even though there was so much of sound around Krishna and Balaram, one sound could be heard. The lake bells, the trinklets, the lake bells of Krishna and Balaram, they were tinkling. They were tinkling. Because no matter how loud is any sound produced by anyone, Anything that is in touch with Krishna produces the loudest sound. And that's why even the trinklets are transcendental. Does Krishna book leave anything to imagination? Everything is described. Everything is described. And all the people clapped in great ecstasy, and they were all susukam. And that's what devotional service is about. Devotional service is all about susukam actually. And that's why they were all happy. And at that point of time, everybody was happy but one person. And now the time of Kamsa being killed is coming. Kamsa looked around everyone, and Bhagavatam tells us he was very morose. And not only was he morose, he was very aggrieved. He did not clap, he did not offer any benedictions, any congratulations. He resented the trumpets and the drums because they were played for Krishna. He felt very sorry for himself that all my good wrestlers have died and the rest have run away. You know what he did? He turned around and told the band that was playing music, stop playing. He then turned around and told his soldiers, the two sons of Vasudev should immediately be driven out of Mathura. The cowherd boys who have come with them, they should all be plundered and all their riches should be taken away. Nanda Maharaj, who's here, arrest him and kill him for his cunning behavior. And that rascal Vasudev should also be killed without delay. And now Kamsa did the final straw. My father Ugrasena, who always supported them, kill him too. When someone does not follow the rules and orders of God, Bhagavatam tells us they go mad. When they don't follow the instructions of the Lord, they destroy themselves actually. In 332 of Bhagavad Gita, this point is very strongly stated by Krishna. Yetu etat abhyasuyattu. Nanu tishtanti me matam. Sarva jnana vimudam stan. Vidhi nastan achetasaha. The translation is very powerful. Anyone who out of envy will disregard the teachings and instructions of Krishna and do not follow them regularly, they will be bereft of all knowledge. They will be befooled and they will be ruined in all their endeavors for perfection. Isn't that what happened to Kamsa? Kamsa fulfilled 332 of Bhagavad Gita. He lost his mind, he lost his intelligence, and now he will become ruined. Because when Kamsa spoke in this way, Krishna became transcendently angry with him. And within a second, the Lord had jumped onto the high dais where Kamsa was. He was on the ground, but he just jumped up there. But Kamsa was ready for him because he had been ready for him all his life, isn't it? Since the day he heard the 8th child is coming, Kamsa always was remembering him. So he was ready, took out his sword, and he thought that with his sword, he was ready to actually kill Krishna. As he wielded his sword, Bhagavatam tells us, hither and thither, Krishna just caught hold of him with great force. He evaded the sword and caught hold of him. And when he caught hold of him, what did he do? The great Supreme Personality of Godhead knocked the crown from Kamsa's head, grabbed his long hair in his hand, and he dragged him from his seat to the wrestling dais. Can you imagine? Dragged him from there through the wrestling dais, just dragged him like a commoner is being dragged, and he just threw him down. Then he straddled him on his chest, and he began to strike him over and over and over again. And from the strokes of Krishna's fist, nothing else needed. Kamsa's vital force just left him. But Krishna was not finished. As if to assure his parents and everyone who was there that he's truly dead. Sometimes when a lion has finished with a prey, Prabhupada says, what does it do? After killing it, right, it drags it here and there, just to show that I am lion and I've killed something. Krishna dragged the body of Kamsa after he was dead. And he dragged it, Bhagavatam says, to please his parents. And he did that because for so many years, Vasudeva and Devaki lived in fear that their son would be found out. For so many years, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mata lived in fear that the demons will come and they will vanquish Krishna or kill their baby boy. In that way, Krishna assured his parents that he was there and that everything has been taken off. The important thing is this: just before Krishna finally dealt the hard blow on him, when Kamsa saw Krishna, Bhagavatam tells us actually that Kamsa saw Krishna in his form of Vishnu with a wheel in his hand. with a wheel in his hand. But actually our acharyas also tell us that the Lord also appears in another instance with the wheel in his hand. You remember him as Ratangapani? When he took that wheel, and he had that wonderful pastime with Bhishma Dev, right? Threatening to stop Bhishma Dev and to break his own vow, actually. Now, actually, Kamsa had the great fortune of seeing Krishna and meditating on him in this form, actually. The form of the Lord, which is known as Ratangapani, and simultaneously the form of the Lord as he holds the wheel. And therefore, Prabhupada says the form of the Lord as Krishna, which means Narayana, holding the wheel, the conch shell, the lotus flower. So this is the way Kamsa left this world. And according to the opinions of authorities, Prabhupada says, because Kamsa meditated and was absorbed so much in Krishna, Kamsa attained what we call Sarupya Mukti. Sarupya Mukti, this is very different from Sayuja Mukti. Sayuja Mukti is when you, like for example, Sishupal, he merged, with the impersonal effulgence of Krishna. But Kamsa, he was quite lucky. Krishna gave him the position of actually having the same bodily features of Narayana. Same features as Narayana. I know some devotees have told me this is not fair. This is not fair. That means you can be International Society for Kamsa Consciousness and still go back to Krishna. They're both iskcon, by the way. They're both iskcon, but which member you want to be of which organization, that's up to us. But this shows us one thing, Prabhus and Matajis. It shows us the great, great mercy of Krishna. And Prabhupada says, if Krishna can be merciful to demons like Kamsa, even like demons like Putana, you remember how Putana came and wanted to kill him with the poisoned milk from her breast. But Krishna not only sucked the life air out of her, he removed all her sin, but he gave her the position of motherhood, Dhatri, so that she can eternally serve him in that way, all because she pretended to be a mother. Nothing else, just pretended. And that also purified her. All Kamsa did was, he was remembering Krishna day in, day out. Kamsa would take 8 steps up, from the stairs to his throne. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He would remember the 8th child of Devaki. We take 8 steps all the time. How many of us remember Krishna? Nobody remembers Krishna. But he could remember Krishna. So Prabhupada says that this is the great mercy of the Lord. Kamsa had 8 brothers, and they all came when Kamsa died. And they wanted to fight with Krishna. But Krishna did not want to fight with them because they were his uncles. Already in one sense, Krishna had broken what we call the Vedic injunctions of killing his kinsmen. And at the same time, he did not want to continue doing that. Krishna is highly intelligent. So Balaram killed all the 8 brothers. By proxy, But Balaram is not different from Krishna. But Balaram's mother Rohini was not related to Kamsa. And therefore, technically, right, Balaram would not be incurring any sin, killing all the 8 brothers. You can't beat Krishna. That's the point of this. We cannot defeat Krishna. And those whom you can't defeat, you please join them. That makes common sense, right? So if you can't beat Krishna, then you join Krishna. And when that happened, all the devatas from heaven, they all became very happy. But all the wives, they became very sad. And they were actually lamenting. And one point before we end today is important. They lamented that, oh dear Kamsa and all the brothers, you all died because of one reason. You treated people who were faultless very badly. That is why today you're paying. And now this whole chapter ends on a very important note. Bhagavatam, right, is actually about behavior. If we espouse shlokas and we talk so much about Krishna, but after Zoom finishes, we treat devotees whom we consider in our hearts to be faultless because they are coming to Krishna. And if we treat them not very well, what does it speak about our devotional service? Therefore, anything that happens to us, we should take it as fair, because Krishna is super soul. He knows in our heart what we deserve and what we don't. And so Krishna was very kind. He actually consoled all the wives of the dead husbands and Kamsa's wife also. He consoled them because they were his aunties. And he personally supervised the entire funeral. Only the Lord can do this, Prabhu, said Mataji's. You imagine killing someone, going to that person's funeral and conducting the funeral. They will kill you. But in the spiritual world, none of them actually became agitated when Krishna personally did this. They all became appeased because Krishna is Adbhutaha and he's absolute. And in that way, Krishna, after taking care of the dead, consoling the relatives, he then did one last thing. He went to Vasudeva and Devaki and he fell at their lotus feet. And he begged them for forgiveness that so many years I could not be with you. And when Devaki Mata and Vasudeva heard this, they became very touched. They did not know what to do when they saw Krishna falling at their feet. Because at that moment, they could realize that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And thus ends this beautiful chapter of the killing of Kamsa. Jai Vrindaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra ki. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. What a wonderful pastime, Prabhuji. And very, very nicely also explained. And you took us from Dwarka, from Mathura to Vrindavan in between. So when the ladies in Mathura were talking, you took us to Gopis as well, and actually combined the two rasas of Mathura and Vrindavan as well. So thank you very much, Prabhuji, for very nicely explaining the pastime as well as so many teachings as well that you have brought out. So the devotees already have started raising their hands. We'll take those questions. Kirtan Prabhu, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Oji, Dewan pranams. Thank you for another nice class. Prabhu, my question, you mentioned a statement that the supreme occupation for humanity is to render service to Lord Krishna.
Yes.
Now there are sometimes there are two parties. When there are those people that say that the supreme occupation is we should help the poor, donate to them, feed the hungry, and all of that side of things. So, when we're devotees and we're donating to the temples and things like that, people sometimes say, hey, why are you donating to the temple and this? Use that money. Temples already have lots of money. They have all of these people that donate. Use that money to do this instead. So if we have someone in our circle of influence, someone who's with an open mind, willing to listen, how can we help them understand that Krishna consciousness is the highest welfare activity above and, everything else?
Yeah. Actually, frankly, that's a big challenge, Prabhu. Because you will realize, as we all have, that our spiritual journey initially did not make us, in our spiritual journey, I think many of us found it also a bit difficult to understand that, especially if we have been driven by the fact that people are suffering, and it seems to be more practical to actually, give something to something that actually works, you see. But I have found personally, from my experience, that when I try to explain to persons who are interested in giving, that what's important in giving is not to do a stopgap measure. For example, there's always this idea, even in the material world, that if farmers are starving, for example, which is a better option, to give them food or to teach them how to grow crops the right way? If you teach farmers how to grow crops the right way, they will be able to be self-sufficient in a much longer period of time. And therefore, we try to tell everyone that while this body is very important, it is the soul that maintains the body. And where is the food for the soul, and where is the service to the soul? If service to the soul is given, the body automatically becomes nourished. It's like, you want the golden egg, but you don't take care of the chicken. The chicken dies and no more golden eggs. Sometimes when we explain to them this point, they understand, especially when you tell them the idea about, is it important to help someone by giving them food, or do you educate them and give them the skills so that they can continue doing something which is more worthwhile? That's when they start sitting back and thinking, so what you're telling me is that this philosophy tells us that if something is connected to the Supreme, or if it nourishes the soul, then that is actually going to help people become more permanently happy over a spectrum of time than impermanent happiness. Some of them do get it, Prabhu, after a while. If purity of heart is there, and if we sincerely believe it ourselves, then we can transmit this very nicely to others too. I hope that's useful, Kirtivanta Prabhu.
Yes, Roger, thank you very much. There's always that saying that's used that teacher give someone a fish or teach them how to fish. But I like your example much better because it doesn't require any violence to animals. The farming example. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, Bharadwaj Rishi Prabhu has another question.
Hare Krishna, Bharadwaj.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna, Dandavad.
Prabhuji, I just wanted to add, I have a question as well, but just wanted to add, as I was hearing the verses that, you are reciting, it made it so beautiful. Thank you, Prabhuji.
No,
And
thank you.
I need to listen to the lecture again and then listen them again and listen to them again. Thank you very much. And Prabhuji, my question is, in the beginning, you actually talked about determination. And we need to use the determination in the proper direction. So having determination is good, but using it in a proper way is most important. So sometimes even in devotional services also, sometimes we are determined to do something and we are not so determined to do something else. So why does that happen? And how can we counter that, Prabhuji?
The main reason why sometimes we seem to be determined in one thing and why we are not, Prabhu, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has the answer. In one of his famous books, Harinam Chintamani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's due to weakness of the heart. Weakness of the heart, he calls it Hridaya Dauluva. It means weakness of the heart. When we don't have enough faith in Krishna, and when our sadhana and our spiritual practice is not entrenched deeply, then what happens is sometimes, we are dictated by intelligence and the mind, such that sometimes we are determined in some factors and sometimes we're not determined in the areas we should be. And this inconsistency is due to the fact that we have not become completely connected to the chanting of the holy name, and the quality of our devotional service may be lacking. So quantity may be there, Prabhu, 16 rounds, waking up for Mangalarti. But after waking up for Mangalarti, what is our mood when we perform Mangalarti? That's the difference between an advancing devotee and a struggling devotee. It's only maybe 2-3 minutes actually. The difference is actually time. A struggling devotee, after finishing class, he will talk about the weather, prasadam, and everything else. The advancing devotee, after class, he will meditate on what has happened and he will think about it. He will ingest it. That few minutes makes the difference in advancement. And that has an impact on the consistency of our qualities in whatever we do, Prabhu. It's a subtle but deep connection. That is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur tells us. I hope it's useful, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Harekrishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Thank you very much for another nice class, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, in the beginning you were mentioning about the verse Yasyasya Bhaktir Bhagavati Akinchana. So where it says about so when there is no devotional service, then where is the good qualities in a person? But in our day-to-day life, sometimes we see some people have some good qualities, like they're
better than ours sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, and they'll be very helpful. But when we try to give Krishna to them, they'll straight away reject it. So, how to see that situation, Prabhuji?
Very good point. Now, this actually proves the verse, you see. It proves the verse that you can have Krishna and not, when you have Krishna, these qualities eventually will come. But if you don't have Krishna or you resist Krishna, you may develop them because of piety in previous life, because your gunas are nice. Those who are in mode of goodness, they tend to be very nice. Those in mode of passion, they may have some qualities which are admirable, But that's coming from previous samskars, Prabhu. And these previous samskars will end. They will exhaust because you're not depending on Krishna to come out of this. So someone may be good, but how long he can be good is a question. And he may be good because something is favorable to him, but he may change when something is not favorable to him. But when someone takes up Krishna consciousness, it becomes a very strong platform to move forward, you see. And the question you're asking is why good people don't take up the Krishna consciousness? Why is it that they are not interested in that? Because there is a difference between having good qualities and having faith in God. The assumption we have in our mind is good people should automatically be godly people. But Bhagavatam makes a very important distinction that good people may not always be godly people. But godly people eventually can become good people. Subtle, but very important. The problem is our assumption, Prabhu. It's not those people who don't want to take up Krishna consciousness. We have assumed they should because they are displaying good things. I have met many people who are really not, I would say, good, but they came to Krishna and eventually they became good. And I've met many people who are really nice people, but all their life they will never touch Krishna. So what is good and what is bad, in the words of Prahlad Maharaj, Yasmat Priya Apriya Viyoga Samyoga Janma. In the 7th canto, 9th chapter, he says this point. He says that the whole world is moving based on what is pleasing to me, I'm nice. What is not pleasing, I'm not nice. Some things I accept, some things I don't accept. So the best way to come out of this duality is devotional service. Does that help, Prabhu? It's the way we are seeing things, you see.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I also have 2 questions. If you have some time, I can
Yes,
ask
yes,
them.
I do. Yeah, please.
Prabhuji, the first question that I have is again related to your verses, Prabhuji. There are so many verses that you have memorized, and you can just recite whenever like that topic is coming. And what is even more interesting from my perspective is that you can also remember their exact verse numbers. So what is the secret, Prabhuji? How do you actually memorize those verses and the verse numbers as well with them? And you can actually recollect them when you are giving lectures?
Maybe it's also because of the training, Prabhu, that Maharaj, gave me in that sense. He told me that if you want to quote a shloka, you must give the audience hearing the reference, because if you give them the reference, then they will go back and they will look it up. And when you give them the reference, that means you can't cheat them also, which means you have to know the shloka well. Because when they look it up and realize, hey, he's saying one thing and shloka is another thing, then they know you are just trying to pass off as some pandit, you see. So he said, if you remember the shloka and the verse numbers, it will check you. It will check your honesty. Otherwise, it's very easy for us to learn shlokas, become pandits, and revel in the fact that people think, oh, you know so many shlokas. If you don't put them into practice, you don't understand them. It's of no value. So maybe that's why, I personally have been driven to try as far as possible. There must be reference. And when I write these things in my notebooks, I always have the numbers. So if I learn the verses, I learn them with the numbers. Yeah. So in that way, it helps, it helps. Yeah.
So, Prabhuji, do you recite them regularly? That
Yes.
is how you are able to remember them?
Yes, every day, Prabhu. So Mondays I recite, for me, for example, Mondays I recite all my Bhagavad Gita shlokas. Then Tuesday I recite the bhagavatam shlokas which have a certain meter, like Bhagavad Gita shlokas. Then Tuesday or Wednesday I will recite the shlokas which have that nice, na janmanunam mahato na saubhagam, that meter. Then there are many verses that I've learned from there. Then there are other verses, which are like Brahma Samhita lyrics, so in those, Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paribhavita Hrit Saroja. So like that, there are some shlokas also. So this way, most of my recitation is going on while I'm taking bath, bro. So that's the easiest time, Instead of just, looking here, looking there, it's best to just chant them. And then you're on the bus, you're in between waiting for the court to happen or some cases to come. It becomes, so much a natural part of our lives. It really helps, bro. And in difficulty, somehow Krishna will give us the right verses to remember. He really does. He really does.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That is very helpful. Prabhuji, another question that I have is about the remaining silent, that point that you were mentioning, that we say that when somebody is silent, he is agreeing to it. Maunam sammati lakshanam. But when actually at the same time, when the two devotees are fighting, it is also said that the devotees should not be actually taking sides. So sometimes the devotees actually use this second instruction to remain silent, because if you take sides or if you talk in between about when the fighting is going on, then we are taking sides and we don't want to take sides. So what happens probably if the two devotees are fighting and if you remain silent? What is the implication?
Actually, there are two different scenarios. I'm glad you raised it. In the first scenario, one devotee is speaking ill of the other, but that devotee may not be there, or the devotee may be there and just very silently is hearing it and not saying anything. And if that devotee continues in a very belligerent or intimidating manner, either we should move away because we are not involved in it, or inform the authorities because we don't have adhikar, maybe they're very senior, or we should step up and say, Prabhu, I don't think you should speak this way to that devotee. If there are some issues between both of you, you should have a senior devotee sit down. You should speak openly about what you felt, and he must be given he must be given a chance to speak about what he or she felt also. So that's one example. In another example, you have a full-blown fight between two devotees. When they are having a full-blown fight and they are both going on at each other, if we don't have the adhikar to say anything, best to remain silent, chant Hare Krishna or go away. Because you cannot decide who is actually doing what, because they are both in Kurukshetra mode, you see. So what to do, you can't. You just walk away and just go in Vrindavan mode. That's the only thing you can. But if you're in a position like a leader or someone who has an adhikar of relationship, you can tell them both, please don't go on like this. Let's sit down and do an Ishtagoshti, and try to understand that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I hope that clarifies the situation.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Prabhuji, another point that you actually raised was about the contemporaries and how it is very difficult to not have envy amongst the contemporaries. And that point you were mentioning about when the Mathura ladies were talking about gopis. So, Prabhuji, can you actually give some practical tips as well, Prabhuji, for contemporaries, like the equals, how they can not develop envy amongst themselves? Prabhuji?
Very nice point, Prabhu. I think personally the best way for contemporaries not to be envious of each other, there are two things. One is the quality of our sadhana. If our spiritual practice is very nice, that spiritual practice will protect envy from entering into our hearts. It will inspire us to actually be inspired by others whom we are close to or contemporaries. The second thing is, while on one level, contemporaries, I may consider someone a contemporary on one level, but actually deep in my heart, Prabhu, the mood I should have is actually there is no one who's a contemporary of me, because everyone is actually more advancing than me. And if someone is new to Krishna consciousness, I will still serve them, but I will not take the higher ground, you see. So if two persons, we are all about the same age maybe, and we are working together, same batch, we came to Krishna consciousness together, we may appear to be contemporaries, but actually in each of our hearts, we should actually in our hearts say, actually, this devotee is more advanced than me, but he's very kind. He's actually accepted me as contemporary. I think that's safe, Prabhu. That is safe.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I think very short but to the point answer. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.
I don't see any more hands up. So, are there any other questions or comments from anyone? No? So thank you very much, Prabhuji, for again taking your very, very valuable time out and spending that with us on the Friday evening. And I'm sure that there would be so much other service that you would have in your to-do list. And even after that, you have taken the time to actually share this wisdom with us. So we are very grateful. And just to show our gratitude for Prabhuji, if we can all chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra loudly. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
His Grace Devakinandan Prabhuji ki
Jai.
Ananta Koti
Hare
Vaishnava
Krishna.
Ji. Thank you,
Yeah.
Prabhu's Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Very happy to
Thank
see
you
you.
very
Krishna
much.
willing, see you again. Thank you. Thank you very much.